When the distress signal went out across the stars, it was filled with fear. The Deathworlder alliance, made of many strong alien species, had faced wars before, but this time was different. The enemy was something they had never seen before, the Archaeon swarm. These creatures were not a normal army. They were alive, endless, and hungry. They spread through galaxies like a disease, consuming every planet in their path. Entire worlds went silent after the swarm passed. Cities that once glowed with life now floated as ashes in space. The Deathworlders tried everything. They sent fleets, soldiers, and scientists, but nothing worked. The swarm kept coming, faster and stronger than ever. The Alliance had always believed they were the toughest beings in the known galaxy. Each of their home planets was harsh and deadly, filled with dangers that had made their species powerful survivors. That's why they called themselves Deathworlders. They came from worlds where only the strong survived, and they thought that made them unbeatable. But against the swarm, even the strongest were falling. When the call for help was sent, it was meant to reach anyone, anywhere, who could fight. It was a desperate message carried by automated satellites through the cold blackness of space. It was not a command, it was a plea. We are losing. We need help. Days passed. Then weeks. No one answered. The remaining fleets were running low on fuel and morale. Many believed the signal would never be heard. Then one day something strange happened. A new signal arrived, short, cold, and human. It was only one line long. Help is coming. The Alliance command stations went silent. Humanity? Few in the galaxy had ever met them. They were still a young species, known mostly for their aggression and strange bravery. Rumors said they came from a planet so dangerous that even their plants could kill. Other races called it a Class 10 death world, a place where no other species would survive for even a day. Yet somehow humans had thrived there. They built cities, machines, and ships, and then they reached the stars. Most of the Deathworlder generals didn't know whether to feel hope or fear. One officer, an old war veteran named Kareth, spoke what many were thinking. Humans, they're reckless. If they come, they'll bring chaos with them. But chaos was better than extinction. The Alliance had no other choice. They waited. The human message didn't say when they would arrive or what kind of help they were sending. Days turned into tense silence. Then one of the deep space sensors picked up movement, something approaching from the human sectors. It was moving fast, faster than any ship the Deathworlders had ever tracked. The readings made no sense. The object was huge, far too large for a single warship, and yet it traveled at impossible speed. In the observation decks of the main Alliance command ship, crews gathered around the holographic display. The signal grew stronger, closer, clearer. Someone whispered, "It's a ship." Another voice followed. "No, that can't be right. It's too big." The numbers on the screens kept changing. The size of the approaching object was compared to known ships. The largest of the Alliance fleet was 5 kilometers long. This object was more than twice that. Some of the officers thought it might be a colony ark, a moving city. Others feared it was an asteroid. But the humans had said help was coming. Could this be what they meant? When it finally arrived in the system, everyone held their breath. The ship didn't come in quietly. It tore out of FTL space like a storm, shaking nearby stations. Its surface was black and scarred, covered in armor plating that seemed almost alive. Every inch of it looked battle-worn, like it had been through 1,000 wars. There were no glowing insignias, no bright markings, just a dark hull absorbing the light of the nearby star. It moved with the slowness of something ancient, heavy and unstoppable. The ship sent no greeting, no request for permission to enter orbit. It simply aligned itself near the fleet and stayed silent. The Deathworlders scanned it, but their instruments gave confusing data. Energy levels inside the vessel were off the charts. Reactor signatures showed power outputs higher than any known design. Even the hull materials didn't match anything in the database. It was as if humanity had built something beyond reason, a monster in the shape of a ship. One communication officer finally broke the silence. "What is that thing?" The human transmission came seconds later. The voice was calm, synthetic but human-made. "This is Sol Command Vessel Designation Leviathan. Standing by for deployment." The name echoed across the command deck. Leviathan, a creature of myth, a beast from the deep. The Deathworlders exchanged uneasy glances. The humans hadn't sent a fleet, they had sent this. A single ship. a black shadow floating in the stars. Inside the Alliance Council chamber, the leaders argued. Some believed the humans were mocking them, sending only one ship to face an army. Others thought the humans had misunderstood the situation. Do they think one ship can fight the swarm? Someone shouted. We needed help, not a death sentence. But Kareth, the old veteran, watched the readings quietly. He had seen human reports before, stories of impossible battles where small human fleets defeated larger enemies through sheer will and strange tactics. They wouldn't come this far to joke, he said softly. If they sent one ship, then that ship must be enough. The next hours were filled with tension. The Leviathan remained silent. No lights, no visible crew. Its presence felt heavy, like a predator waiting in the dark. Every other ship in the fleet seemed small beside it. Even from a distance, the Deathworlders could feel the power radiating from its engines. Technicians tried to scan its weapon systems, but their computers locked up every time they tried. It was as if the Leviathan's systems refused to be read. Rumors spread quickly among the crews, stories that the ship's AI was alive, that it could think and decide on its own. Some whispered that it had already chosen its targets long before it arrived. In the nearby barracks, young soldiers stared out the viewing windows, watching the giant vessel drift silently among the stars. One of them, a rookie pilot, whispered to his commander, "Do you think it's really here to help us?" The commander didn't answer. He didn't know. The ship looked less like a savior and more like something born for destruction. On the bridge of the Leviathan, no one could see what was happening, but somewhere deep inside, machines hummed, reactors pulsed, and engines breathed like lungs. The ship was alive in its own way, its systems preparing, calculating, waiting for a command that only it could understand. The Deathworlders expected an army. Instead, they got a monster, a single human creation so powerful that it made even the bravest soldiers uneasy. But the message had been clear. Humanity had answered their call for help. And though no one knew what kind of help it would bring, one truth began to spread quietly through the fleet. If this was humanity's idea of rescue, then perhaps the stories about them were true. The species that came from a deadly world had brought something that reflected their nature, terrifying, unstoppable, and utterly committed. As the Leviathan drifted closer to the Allied ships, its massive shadow passed over their hulls like an eclipse. Every crew member who saw it felt the same chill run through their bones. Something about it didn't feel like technology anymore. It felt ancient, almost mythic. Somewhere deep in the command network, an Alliance technician noticed something strange. The Leviathan wasn't just observing the battlefield. It was mapping it, learning it, connecting to their data grids. It was preparing for something big. But before the technician could report it, the human signal returned, this time stronger, sharper, colder. Do not interfere. Target acquisition in progress. The Deathworlders didn't understand what that meant, but they obeyed. After all, they had called for help, and now help had come, just not in the form they expected. As silence filled the comms and the black ship continued its quiet, steady motion toward the front lines, every being on those ships knew that the war was about to change. Humanity had arrived. And whatever they had built, it wasn't just a ship. It was a message to the universe. When humanity answers a cry for help, they don't send angels. They send monsters. The next few days were filled with silence. The Deathworlders kept watching the human ship, unsure what to do or say. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The Leviathan did not communicate, did not ask for orders, and did not explain its purpose. It just drifted in space, quiet and unmoving, like a sleeping giant. The black hull absorbed all light around it, and the closer anyone looked, the more uneasy they felt. It wasn't just big, it was unnatural. From the command stations of the Deathworlder fleet, many officers tried to reach out to the humans. They sent messages in different frequencies, hoping for a reply. None came. Instead, the ship just remained silent, letting its size speak for itself. Engineers studied the readings, and their screens filled with impossible data. The Leviathan's structure was so dense that even the most powerful scanners couldn't see through its layers. Energy signatures from inside were off the scale, far greater than any reactor ever recorded. It was as if the ship had a heart that could power an entire planet. On the bridge of the main Deathworlder flagship, Commander Kareth watched the Leviathan carefully. He had fought many wars and seen many strange technologies, but this ship felt different. It didn't look like it was built for show. It looked like it was built for one purpose: destruction. and yet Kareth couldn't tell if it was meant to destroy the enemy or protect the weak. He wasn't sure which side of that line humanity stood on. Rumors began to spread through the Alliance fleet. Some said the ship was controlled by an artificial intelligence so powerful it could think like a god. Others said it was haunted, crewed by humans who were already dead but still obeyed orders. The name Monster Ship began to whisper from one ship to another. The Deathworlders were used to danger. They were born on deadly worlds. But something about this ship made even the bravest soldiers uneasy. Finally, a small transmission came from the Leviathan. The voice was calm, emotionless, and purely human. Alliance Command, this is Sol Command Vessel Leviathan. Do not approach within 50,000 kilometers. Stand by for combat readiness, and that was all it said. No greeting. No explanation. Just an order. The Deathworlder officers looked at each other in confusion. Combat readiness. There was no sign of the Archaeon swarm yet. The enemy was still a full day away from the system. What was the human ship preparing for? But the tone of the message left no room for questions. Every ship began adjusting their positions, following the Leviathan's order without argument. Hours passed. The stars outside remained quiet, but inside the Leviathan something was waking up. The first signs were small. Massive metal panels shifting, light flickering beneath the surface of the hull. Then the entire ship began to move. The black armor plates rearranged like living skin. Enormous openings appeared along the sides, revealing rows of weapon ports so large that even the biggest Deathworlder battleship could have fit inside one. Sensors detected extreme heat signatures coming from the ship's core. Whatever power source it had, it was awakening now. The Deathworlders had seen war machines before, but never one that seemed alive. The Leviathan's movement was smooth, like a creature stretching after a long sleep. Even though it was made of steel and machinery, it moved as if it had muscle and breath. Then suddenly the alarm blared across the fleet. The swarm had arrived. Thousands of enemy ships dropped out of FTL space, filling the sky with their organic black forms. The Archaeon swarm looked like living nightmares, massive bioships pulsing with heat and life, their bodies covered in bone-like armor. They moved fast, like predators smelling blood. The Deathworlder ships quickly formed defensive lines, preparing to open fire. But before they could act, the Leviathan moved. It didn't wait for orders. Its engines roared to life, sending out shockwaves strong enough to rattle nearby ships. The monster ship moved straight toward the incoming swarm. At first, the Deathworlder captains shouted warnings. It's going alone. It's going straight into the center of the swarm. But no one on the Leviathan replied. The huge ship charged forward like a black arrow through the stars. As it moved, its weapons came to life. Enormous rail cannons slid into place along the hull, glowing with blue light. Its forward section opened, revealing energy projectors the size of towers. And then, without a sound, the Leviathan fired. The first shot was so powerful it blinded sensors across the fleet. A beam of pure energy ripped through space, hitting the swarm's front line and slicing through it like paper. Dozens of enemy ships vanished instantly, vaporized into glowing dust. The Deathworlder crews could hardly believe what they were seeing. They had expected the humans to help, but this wasn't help. This was annihilation. Before the swarm could react, the Leviathan fired again and again. Each strike destroyed hundreds of ships. The swarm tried to scatter, but the Leviathan tracked them all at once. Its targeting system seemed to predict their movements before they even made them. It was as if the ship could see the future. Then something even stranger happened. The Deathworlder fleet began to receive data packets directly from the Leviathan. Their weapon systems started to respond faster, their shields strengthened, and their targeting computers improved. Somehow the Leviathan was controlling their systems, linking every ship in the fleet together into one massive combat network. Their computers showed new command codes, human codes, being uploaded into their systems. Who authorized this connection? One of the technicians shouted. We're being hacked. But Kareth shook his head. No, they're not hacking us, they're helping us. On the screens, the swarm was falling apart. The Leviathan's weapons tore through the enemy formations like they were made of paper. Massive explosions lit up space. But the Deathworlders also saw something else. Inside the Leviathan, human life signs were dropping. The ship was fighting like a living creature, but it was burning itself from the inside out to do it. Every weapon it fired came with a cost. Every shot drained the human's life support, overloaded systems, and flooded compartments with radiation. Still, the Leviathan didn't stop. Its captain's voice came through one final time. "We hold the line. No retreat." The Deathworlders, inspired by the sheer madness of that order, charged forward to support the humans. Their ships surrounded the Leviathan, covering its flanks, trying to protect it from being overwhelmed. But the human ship didn't need protection. It was the one doing the protecting. When the swarm finally realized that the Leviathan was the main threat, it sent its largest ships directly toward it. These were living fortresses miles long, capable of spitting acid plasma strong enough to melt moons. They fired all at once, surrounding the Leviathan in blinding light. For a few seconds it disappeared inside the explosions. Everyone watching thought it was over. Then the light cleared. The Leviathan was still there. Its armor was glowing red-hot, its surface cracked and burned, but it was still moving. From its sides, hundreds of smaller turrets activated, firing in every direction. It was like watching a god of war awaken. Even as the swarm's biggest ships closed in, the Leviathan rammed through them, tearing their bodies apart. Every movement was brutal and final. It didn't seem to care about its own damage. It just kept fighting. The Deathworlder officers could only watch in awe. They had called for help, expecting soldiers and strategy. Instead, humanity had sent something else entirely. A weapon so terrifying that even allies feared it. As the last of the swarm began to retreat, the Leviathan slowed down. Its weapons stopped firing. The bright glow from its reactors began to fade. It had won the battle, but at a terrible cost. Inside the ship, many of the crew were gone. Systems were failing one by one. Yet even as the ship grew silent, a faint human voice came through the comms again, weaker this time. "Enemy fleet neutralized. You're safe now." And then there was silence. The Leviathan drifted, its lights dim, smoke rising from its hull. The Deathworlders didn't know what to say. They had seen courage before, but this was something else. Something beyond logic, beyond fear. Humanity had not sent a fleet or soldiers or diplomats. They had sent a monster born to fight nightmares. As the last sparks faded from the Leviathan's engines, every captain in the fleet understood one thing clearly. The humans were not like any other species. When they came to help, they didn't come to survive. They came to end the threat no matter the cost, and in that moment, as the black ship floated silently among the stars, the Deathworlders realized they hadn't just witnessed a rescue, they had witnessed a legend being born. The Archeon swarm came like a storm that never ended. The space around the Deathworlder fleet filled with darkness and motion as thousands of living ships poured in from the void. They moved like a tide of claws and teeth, each vessel alive and hungry. Their wings glowed with green fire. Their weapons were made of acid and plasma, and their purpose was simple: consume everything in their path. The Deathworlders had faced them before, but never in numbers like this. Even from miles away, the view from their ships was terrifying. It looked like a sea of monsters rushing toward them, blacking out the stars. The Deathworlder commanders shouted orders, their fleets forming into defensive lines. Shields activated, cannons charged, and communication channels filled with noise. But deep inside, everyone knew this battle might be their last. The swarm was too large, too strong, and too fast. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was survival. And then, through all the chaos, the Leviathan moved. The black human ship, silent until now, suddenly came alive. Massive panels along its sides opened, and glowing light burst from the cracks like fire escaping a volcano. Its engines roared, releasing waves of blue energy that rippled across space. Every sensor in the fleet went off at once as the Leviathan began to power up. Inside the human ship, alarms echoed, and mechanical voices repeated commands. Reactor at 110%. Weapon systems online. Neural link engaged. Human crew members sat at their stations, faces pale but determined. They knew what was coming. They had trained for this one mission, knowing it might be their last. The ship's AI, codenamed Morrigan, activated across every deck. Its voice was calm, almost too calm as it connected itself directly to the minds of the human operators. Their thoughts became the ship's thoughts. Their fear became its anger. Together they became something more, a single weapon made of flesh and metal. Without a word, the Leviathan surged forward. Its first attack came faster than anyone expected. The front section of the ship opened like a massive mouth, revealing a rail cannon the size of a mountain. The weapon fired a slug of metal at nearly the speed of light. The impact tore through the enemy's front line, shredding hundreds of swarm ships in one instant. The explosion was so bright it lit up half the sector. The Deathworlders could only watch, speechless. The swarm responded immediately, turning all of its fury toward the Leviathan. Thousands of bioships swarmed around it, firing acid beams and plasma bursts that could melt moons. But the Leviathan didn't stop. Its hull glowed red-hot as the attacks hit, but the ship's shields held strong. Armor plates shifted automatically, sealing damage almost as soon as it appeared. It was as if the ship refused to die. Then the Leviathan fired again, this time unleashing smaller weapons. Dozens of heavy railguns, laser batteries, and missile pods opened along its sides. Every weapon moved in perfect sync, each targeting a different enemy. There was no hesitation, no delay. The Deathworlder ships began receiving strange signals, data streams from the Leviathan. The human AI had linked their systems together. It was sharing targeting data, shield frequencies, and tactical commands with every ship in the fleet. Suddenly, the Deathworlders' weapons became more accurate. Their shields stopped failing. Their ships began to move like one coordinated army. "Morgan has control," one officer shouted. "The human AI, it's fighting for us." The Deathworlders didn't resist. They had no time to question how the humans had taken over their systems. All they saw was that they were surviving. For the first time in months of war, the swarm was losing ground. The Leviathan pushed deeper into the enemy lines, its engines blazing like suns. The ship's massive cannons pounded the swarm without mercy. Every shot broke apart another formation. Even the largest Archeon vessels, the huge hive ships that served as command centers, were no match for its firepower. One by one, they exploded, sending waves of organic debris spinning into the dark. But the humans inside were paying the price. The Leviathan's weapons drained enormous energy. Radiation filled the ship's corridors. Many of the crew began collapsing at their stations, their skin burned by invisible heat. Still, they refused to stop. They were connected to the ship now. Its pain was their pain, and its fight was their fight. On the bridge, Captain Ellis stared at the battlefield through dim, flickering screens. Sweat ran down his face, and his voice trembled as he gave orders. "Keep firing. We don't stop until it's over." The AI's voice spoke gently through the speakers. "Captain, hull integrity is dropping. Crew loss at 40%. Recommend retreat." Ellis shook his head. "No retreat. We hold." The AI paused for a moment, then responded simply. "Understood." The Leviathan unleashed everything it had. New weapons opened that even the Deathworlders couldn't identify. Blue lightning cut through space, tearing through the swarm's largest ships. Energy blasts curved through the void like living serpents guided by the AI's mind. For every 100 swarm ships destroyed, a few more took their place, but the Leviathan never slowed down. Then came the moment everyone would remember forever. The swarm's central hive, a living fortress the size of a small moon, appeared on the scanners. It was surrounded by a thick wall of bioships, all protecting it like insects protecting their queen. The Deathworlders knew that if they could destroy the hive, the rest of the swarm would lose coordination. But no one had ever come close enough to even touch it. The Leviathan changed course immediately, heading straight for the hive. "Are they insane?" one of the Deathworlder commanders shouted. "They'll never make it through that wall." But the Leviathan did not hesitate. It accelerated, engines roaring like thunder. The swarm reacted, forming a living shield in front of the hive, but it was too late. The human ship fired all its weapons at once, a blinding wall of energy and metal. Thousands of enemy ships vanished in seconds. The Leviathan tore through their defense line, smashing through their formations like a blade cutting through glass. Inside, alarms screamed louder. Systems were collapsing. Fires broke out across multiple decks. Crew members worked through the smoke, still connected to the ship's neural network. They could feel the Leviathan straining, its structure groaning under the stress, but no one disconnected. They knew this was the end, and none of them wanted to stop before the mission was complete. Finally, when the Leviathan reached the hive's core, the captain gave the final order. "Fire the main cannon." The AI hesitated. "Captain, this will destroy us." Ellis closed his eyes. "Do it." The Leviathan's front cannon charged one last time. The light from its core grew so bright that every ship in the fleet turned away. Then it fired. The beam hit the hive dead center. For a few seconds, everything went silent. Then the hive exploded. The shockwave tore through space, scattering what was left of the swarm. The explosion was so massive that sensors overloaded and communications broke down. When the Deathworlders' ships regained contact, the hive was gone, and so was most of the swarm. Only a few scattered fragments drifted through space, lifeless and cold. The battlefield was quiet. The war that had seemed endless was over, but the Leviathan was silent too. The massive ship floated motionless, its lights dim, its engines cold. The energy readings dropped to 0. It didn't respond to any hails. The Deathworlders called and called, but no one answered. Finally, they sent a small rescue team aboard. What they found inside left them speechless. The ship's corridors were dark, filled with smoke and flickering sparks. Consoles were burned out, walls blackened by heat. Most of the crew were gone, their stations empty. Those who remained were motionless, still connected to their neural links. It was clear they had stayed until their last breath. On the bridge, the captain's chair was empty. Only one thing remained, a small terminal still glowing with a recorded message. When the team played it, a calm human voice filled the air. For those who cannot run, humanity stands. The Deathworlders stood in silence. Some bowed their heads, others saluted. The humans hadn't just helped, they had sacrificed everything. The Leviathan had become more than a ship. It was a symbol. Outside, the wrecked hulk of the Leviathan drifted among the stars. Its armor was cracked, its weapons silent, but it still looked powerful, as if it was merely sleeping. Some of the Deathworlder engineers said they could still detect faint energy pulses inside, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. For hours, the fleet floated in silence, watching the black giant that had saved them. The war was over, but the cost was heavy. Humanity had sent only one ship, and that single ship had ended the swarm. No one would ever forget what they saw that day. The Deathworlders realized that humans didn't fight wars like others. They didn't fight to survive, they fought to protect. And when the universe cried for help, humanity didn't send heroes. They sent a monster that became a legend. After the battle with the swarm, the space around the Deathworlder fleet was quiet but tense. The stars seemed dimmer, as if they were holding their breath. The Leviathan, the monstrous human ship that had wiped out the Archaean swarm single-handedly, floated silently among the debris. Its black armor was scorched, some panels were missing, and fires still burned faintly in sections of the hull. The fleet circled the Leviathan cautiously, unsure what to do next. The humans had saved them, but they had not responded to any communication since the battle ended. It was as if the ship itself had become something else, a living legend, terrifying and untouchable at the same time. The first ships to approach were scouts. Small Deathworlder craft moved toward the Leviathan, shining lights on its hull to signal life. They expected to see crew members or AI drones, anything that could explain why the human ship had gone silent. Instead, the Leviathan did not react. No lights blinked, no hails answered. It floated, massive and quiet, its engines barely humming. Even the veterans on the scout ships felt fear. The Leviathan wasn't just a machine, it felt alive. When the boarding teams arrived, they entered through side hatches that had been left open, likely damaged in the battle. Smoke and heat poured out, and alarms flickered weakly on the ship's panels. The corridors were vast, far larger than any Deathworlder vessel, and empty. Burned-out consoles and scorched walls told the story of the battle from within. The humans had fought until the very end, using their own bodies to maintain the ship's power and weapons. The first humans they found were seated at their stations, pale and unconscious, some showing signs of severe radiation exposure. Others were completely motionless, still connected to neural links. The crew had given everything to the Leviathan to win the battle. Some of them had not survived, but the ship itself had endured. It was clear that every shot fired at the swarm had come at the cost of human life, yet they had never paused. They had continued until the enemy was destroyed. The boarding officers moved cautiously through the ship. Each deck told the same story: silence and sacrifice. It was like walking through a temple built for war, and the walls whispered of the courage of its creators. Yet there were signs of careful design and intelligence in every corner. The Leviathan was not only a weapon, it was a masterpiece of human engineering, combining organic intuition and cold metal precision. Every system seemed designed to respond perfectly to human thought, to act as an extension of their will. The command deck was the most eerie. The captain's chair was empty, and the main console had been burned out in places, but a small terminal still functioned. It was a recording, And when the Deathworlders activated it, the calm, human voice filled the bridge. For those who cannot run, humanity stands. The words resonated through the officers' minds, and for a moment no one moved. It was simple, but it carried the weight of every human life that had been lost to save others. They realized that the humans had not sent a fleet. They had sent a single ship, one capable of ending a war, and the crew had been prepared to die for the mission. The Deathworlders, proud and strong as they were, felt something new: humility. They had faced countless battles, yet nothing in their histories could compare to the courage and calculated recklessness of the humans aboard the Leviathan. It was not just a machine that had won the fight. It was a combination of human determination, intelligence, and sheer willingness to sacrifice everything. The ship itself had become a symbol, a reminder of how far humanity could go when they chose to act. Back on the fleet command ships, the officers tried to analyze what had happened. They studied the Leviathan's weapon systems, its energy outputs, and the way it had linked with the fleet. They realized that humans had achieved something no other species had: a ship that was not only a weapon, but a battlefield coordinator, controlling entire fleets with precision no AI alone could achieve. Every system worked as an extension of human strategy, and it had made them unstoppable. Yet, the question remained: where were the humans now? The boarding teams found signs that many had survived in sections of the ship, but their physical conditions were weak. Radiation burns, nerve damage, and extreme fatigue had claimed most. Those who were alive were barely conscious, connected still to the neural systems that had powered the Leviathan. It was clear that their survival was secondary to the mission. They had fought not for themselves, but for everyone else. The Deathworlders also began to notice something else. Even in apparent silence, the Leviathan was still active. Its sensors were scanning nearby space, its engines maintaining minimal power, and subtle energy pulses flowed through the ship. It was as if it were resting but still aware. The vessel had survived, and though the humans had sacrificed much, the Leviathan remained, a guardian that could awaken whenever needed. The fleet began to understand the true scale of what had occurred. Humanity's approach to war was not about glory or strategy alone. It was about results no matter the cost. While other species sent fleets, humans sent their very essence into one machine. They merged mind and body with metal and energy to create a force capable of defeating a swarm that had never been beaten before. Every shot, every maneuver, every calculation had been guided by human will and sacrifice. As the boarding teams left the Leviathan, they felt both awe and unease. The ship had saved them, but it had done so at a price no one else could imagine. The surviving humans were carried to medical stations, but it was unclear if they would ever fully recover. The Leviathan itself remained, silent yet alive, a reminder of the day humanity had sent a monster to save an entire fleet. Over the next days, the Deathworlders shared their experiences and knowledge of the Leviathan. They studied every detail of the ship's design, its systems, and its methods of combat. Engineers speculated that even if they had studied the Leviathan for centuries, they might never fully understand the ingenuity of human design. Officers told stories of the battle, emphasizing the courage of the crew and the power of the ship. Every account highlighted the fact that humans did not fight like other species. They fought to ensure survival, no matter the personal cost. The legend of the Leviathan grew quickly. Among the Deathworlder fleets, the story spread not just as a tale of victory, but as a warning. Humans were unpredictable. They could be reckless, fearless, and deadly. And when they intervened, they did not act for themselves. They acted for those who could not defend themselves. For the rest of the Alliance, the presence of the Leviathan became more than just a symbol of victory. It was a reminder of the limits of technology without courage, the importance of willpower, and the lengths humanity would go to protect others. Even in silence, the Leviathan communicated something profound. That help could come in forms no one expected, and that sometimes legends were forged not by armies but by a single, unstoppable force willing to pay any price. The fleet slowly returned to normal operations, but no one could forget what they had witnessed. The Leviathan remained in orbit near the fleet, a massive black shadow that had changed the course of the war. Every time a ship passed it, the crew would pause, looking up at the hulking vessel that had destroyed the swarm almost effortlessly. The sense of awe was palpable. mixed with a slight fear of the unknown. Years later, the story of the Leviathan would be told and retold across the Alliance. Children would hear of the humans who sent a single ship to save billions. Officers would study its strategies and its technology, hoping to understand the seemingly impossible coordination between human thought and machine. And somewhere in the quiet void of space, the Leviathan would continue to drift, silent but ready, a sleeping monster waiting for the next call for help. Even though the humans had disappeared inside their vessel, the memory of their courage and sacrifice would linger forever. The Leviathan was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity itself, unstoppable, unpredictable, and willing to sacrifice everything to save others. And in the minds of every Deathworlder, one truth became clear. When humanity answers a call for help, they do not send fleets, they send legends. After the battle, the Leviathan remained where it had fought, a colossal black shadow floating silently among the stars. Its immense hull, scarred and burned from the conflict, seemed to absorb light from the nearby sun, casting a dim shadow over the Allied fleet. The Deathworlders circled cautiously, unsure of what to do next. The humans had done the impossible. They had destroyed the Archean swarm almost single-handedly. Yet the Leviathan remained silent, and no crew responded to any attempts at communication. The silence was unnerving. No one knew whether the humans were dead, unconscious, or simply choosing not to reply. It was as if the ship itself had become a living entity, one that existed not just as a weapon but as a symbol of something far greater. Boarding teams were sent to investigate. When they entered the ship, they were met with eerie quiet. Smoke still drifted through the corridors. Flickering lights gave weak illumination, and the hum of damaged machinery filled the otherwise empty space. Burned-out consoles, cracked panels, and scorched floors bore testimony to the incredible strain the ship had endured. Every system, every component had been pushed beyond its limits to achieve victory. The humans inside had poured their lives into the Leviathan. Some crew members were found unconscious at their stations, suffering from radiation exposure, nerve strain, or exhaustion. Others were motionless, their neural links still engaged with the ship's systems. It was clear that the humans had given everything, sacrificing themselves entirely for the mission. The command deck told the most haunting story. The captain's chair sat empty, surrounded by scorched consoles and broken displays. Yet a single terminal remained active. The Deathworlders activated it and heard the calm voice of a human. Recorded during the battle, "For those who cannot run, humanity stands." The words were simple but profound, carrying the weight of every sacrifice made aboard the Leviathan. They were a testament to the human spirit, a message to the universe that humanity would act when others could not. The Deathworlders realized that the humans had not sent a fleet or a group of soldiers. They had sent one ship, one weapon, and one living legend capable of changing the outcome of an entire war. As the Deathworlders explored the ship, they noticed its design was unlike anything they had ever seen. The Leviathan was not merely a vessel. It was a fusion of human ingenuity, engineering, and sheer willpower. Every system was interconnected, every weapon calibrated to human thought and instinct. The ship could act independently in battle, yet it remained responsive to the crew's commands, amplifying their decision-making abilities and tactical awareness to unimaginable levels. It was the ultimate expression of human determination, a vessel that fought not for glory or personal gain, but to protect and preserve life at any cost. The Deathworlder fleet slowly regained confidence, though the experience had left them in awe. The Leviathan had not only saved them from annihilation, but had done so in a way that redefined everything they thought they knew about combat and strategy. Even the most seasoned officers and veterans were forced to acknowledge that the humans had approached war differently. They had not relied solely on numbers, technology, or conventional tactics. They had relied on courage, sacrifice, and an almost instinctive understanding of what needed to be done. In the following days, the surviving humans aboard the Leviathan were tended to by the Deathworlder medical teams. Many were in critical condition, suffering from radiation burns, neural overload, and extreme fatigue. Yet despite their injuries, they refused to complain or demand comfort. Their focus remained on the mission's success and the lives they had saved. They spoke little, yet the weight of their presence on the Leviathan conveyed far more than words ever could. The crew had not come to conquer or boast. They had come to ensure the survival of others even at the cost of their own lives. While the Deathworlders studied the Leviathan, they also began to understand the strategic genius of humanity. The ship's systems were more than just weapons. They were an extension of human cognition. Through neural linking and advanced AI integration, the humans had essentially transformed the Leviathan into a living weapon, capable of anticipating enemy movements and adapting instantaneously to changing conditions. This combination of human intuition and technological power had allowed a single ship to destroy a fleet the size of the Archeon swarm. The Deathworlders marveled at this achievement, realizing that no other species had ever developed such a seamless integration of mind, machine, and combat capability. The story of the Leviathan quickly spread throughout the Deathworlder alliance. Officers recounted the battle, emphasizing the humans' courage and the ship's incredible capabilities. Engineers and scientists pored over data collected from the Leviathan, trying to reverse engineer its systems, but it was clear that even if they studied it for centuries, they might never fully replicate its design. The humans had created something beyond conventional understanding. A weapon, a guardian, and a legend all in one. The legend of the Leviathan grew even as the humans aboard it recovered slowly, their fates uncertain. The ship itself remained in orbit near the fleet, a massive black sentinel. It had endured, silent but alive, and its mere presence inspired awe and caution. The Deathworlders understood that the Leviathan was more than a vessel. It was a symbol of human resolve, a reminder that when humanity acted, it acted decisively, relentlessly, and without regard for personal cost. Over time, the impact of the Leviathan's actions became apparent. The Archeon swarm had been scattered and weakened, allowing the Deathworlders to rebuild and reinforce their territories. But more than the tactical advantage, the presence of the Leviathan had changed the way the Deathworlders viewed humanity. They were no longer seen as a reckless young species. Instead, they were regarded as unpredictable, powerful, and capable of acts of extraordinary courage. The humans had shown that when they intervened, they did not just fight, they altered the course of events entirely. The fleet returned to regular operations, but no one could forget the Leviathan. Its massive black form remained in orbit, a silent reminder of what had occurred. Every ship that passed near it paused to acknowledge the presence of the humans' creation, understanding that it represented both protection and the cost of sacrifice. Stories of the Leviathan's battle spread among the fleets, and children learned of the humans who had sent a single ship to save billions. Officers studied the tactics and systems employed, hoping to glean lessons for future conflicts, yet all acknowledged that some part of the Leviathan's genius would remain a mystery forever. The humans aboard slowly recovered, but they bore permanent scars. Many would never fully regain their strength. Yet they carried no resentment, only quiet pride in what had been accomplished. Their mission had succeeded beyond imagination. They had faced impossible odds, given everything, and ensured the survival of countless species. And in doing so, they had created a legend that would endure long after the battle ended. The Leviathan itself continued to drift in space, silent yet vigilant. Sensors still flickered, engines maintained minimal energy, and subtle pulses of power ran through its systems. It was clear the ship had not been destroyed. It had survived, enduring as a guardian for the Alliance and a warning to any who might threaten the peace. The Leviathan had become more than a weapon. It had become a myth, a story of courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice that would inspire generations. As time passed, the story of the Leviathan was told and retold. Children grew up hearing of the humans who sent a single ship to save an entire fleet. Scholars and historians recorded the events, emphasizing the bravery of the crew and the ingenuity of the ship. The tale became a moral lesson, a symbol of hope and a warning that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. Every recounting emphasized one truth. When humanity answers a call for help, they do not merely send forces, they send legends. The Leviathan remained in orbit, a dark sentinel against the stars waiting silently. Its story became a permanent part of the Deathworlder memory. Even years later, when fleets gathered to tell tales of wars fought and won, the battle against the Archeon swarm and the appearance of the Leviathan were always central. The ship was not just remembered for its power, but for the courage, sacrifice, and unwavering determination of those who had made it move, fight, and win. In the end, the humans had changed everything. They had shown that one species, small by galactic standards, could rise to become a force unlike any other. They had sent a monster to protect the weak, and in doing so had become a legend across the stars. The Deathworlders knew that they would never forget the day humanity answered a call for help, proving that when humans act, they do not simply participate, they define the outcome, leaving an indelible mark on the universe. The Leviathan, scarred but unbroken, drifted silently, waiting for the next call. It was more than a ship. It was a promise that wherever danger arose, wherever the helpless cried out, humanity would stand. And in the darkness of space, that promise would shine brighter than any star.